Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Spiritual Activists. I could not be more thrilled. We've got an incredible panel for you here today. The topic of today's show is Stop Walking Dead. We're going to walk into that topic here in a second after we introduce our panelists. We've got Amy Alcini with us today. Welcome, Amy. Oh, I've got Amy on mute. Welcome, Amy. Great to have you. We've got David Pagan from Kick-Ass Dad. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Jay Forty from the Greatness Zone.
Hey all, how is everybody today?
And then we've got Kelly Marceau from kellymarceau.com. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
So today's topic is a powerful one, and it's the idea that people have gotten to this point in society where we're just constantly distracted by our phone, constantly distracted by our television, our news media, and we're not acting in ways that are mindful. So what I first wanted to do was get to the bottom of what is this mindfulness stuff? What is this Eastern message of mindfulness? How is it applied to Western society, and how can it be of value? So I'd love to kind of kick this off to Amy real quick. What you've studied quite a bit of Buddhist philosophy. What is mindfulness?
Mindfulness to me is being aware of and alive and awake in our present situation. There's Thich Nhat Hanh teaches a walking meditation, which is extremely helpful and easy to do, but it's a very slow step, and each step starts at the heel and goes all the way to the toe. So you're feeling every single movement of your foot to the pavement. So it just brings a heightened awareness to the exact second that we're in, and which enables us to be able to have action. We're not being taken by the past or the future because we're hyperly aware of right now, which actually enables us to be in positive action.
That's powerful, and I like that. I like the way you brought that up. Is just being present in each moment, and how being aware of your body sensation and being in observance of what you're actually doing makes a different mindfulness. But what do you say to those people who, just think that this is all, philosophical psychobabble, and that it's a real thing that can actually help you in your life? Kelly, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's not psychobabble and it's not spiritual. It's just it's facts. It's reality. I mean, for the most part, we are always slipping between past, present, and future. A lot of people live in the past, unconsciously caught up in everything that's happened to them. A lot of people are thinking about the future and what's going to be or whatever, but it's really hard for people to stay rooted in what's going on right now. And right now is where all of the power is. So when I think of mindfulness, I mean, I'm constantly on my iPhone, on my computer, distracted a lot, and I have a little girl, and so mindfulness is a very different thing for me than it might be for somebody else who doesn't have a child. When my daughter's around, I can tell when she sees me sort of checked out, and for me it's normal, being checked out is completely normal on a daily basis, but when she brings me sort of into center and reminds me of what it is to be mindful of what's going on, it's basically don't be on autopilot, don't be so sucked into something that you're completely unaware of your surroundings or what other people are saying to you, and those kinds of things. And so in that regard, it actually helps me to stay really present in the moment and know what's going on, rather than going through my day going okay, I know I worked all day and I talked to my daughter a little bit, but what really happened? What went on? Because when we're not present, when we're not actually aware of everything that we're doing, and we're just going from this to this, we're pulled in so many, we're spread so thin that it's hard to actually know or connect to what's going on in our bodies, what's going on with our kids, what's going on with our lovers, our partners, or whatever. So, our lives move very fast in this world, and so presence or just mindfulness gives me the ability to actually show up in a much more meaningful way instead of being distracted all the time.
That resonates with me a lot as well, being a father, because I know I do the exact same thing. I'm going in this direction, this direction, this direction, and oftentimes I'm just not aware of where I am and where I am with my kids. And it's kids are almost like these little Zen masters. They're always present, right?
Totally.
They're in the zone, and they get distracted too. They run from shiny object to shiny object just like we do.
Right.
But each shiny object they run up to, they're fully engaged in that at that moment. And I find that to be really powerful. David, what's your, with Kick-Ass Dad, we've been talking about this a lot. What's your experience with that?
When I think of mindfulness, I kind of think of the not being very mindful. So to me, it's not being mindful. It's just when you go through the motions, right? And that can be helpful in certain aspects of life, because much of our lives are based on a routine. We go to work, we come home, we cook dinner. Especially as a father, for me, I had a really strict schedule with my kids, with work, with what I do on the weekends with them, when I have to drop them off, when I have to pick them up. So you do tend to go into autopilot for certain things, right? You want to, your brain kind of frees up space by putting everything into files, so you just kind of do them no matter what. And it makes it easier on you, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that tends to overflow into other aspects of life, and you just kind of go through the motions every day. And the idea behind that is that, every day is the same, right? We go to work every day, we do this every day, but every day is not the same. Every moment is not the same, because things are happening to everyone all the time, even with everyone in autopilot mode, right? So for me to be mindful, I find, for me personally, is to be aware almost of everybody else's mind, where everyone else is coming from, not just what I'm doing and being in robot mode or have it in cruise control. Being aware that everybody else around me either has an agenda or is dealing with something, and trying to understand what that is so that I can navigate through, in the best way for me, and at the same time, hopefully, bring some happiness or crack a smile on somebody else's face. That's just me, because I like to make people laugh.
Right. So, I'm really curious because, Jay, you're a resident greatness champion, and you're also a resident pragmatist. So I'd like to get your perspective on this idea of mindfulness, how it kind of comes from the center, and then how it expands into developing somebody's greatness.
Well, I think
Did you like that introduction? Did you like that?
That was terrific. Well, that's who I am. So proud of it. Back when I was an accountant and they said, "Oh, you're so anal," I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. That is who I am." Mindfulness, I think, is one of the most important qualities we can have, or we should be talking about. That the absence of paying attention to the moment and all of the information that shows up in that moment is what provides enough information for the next moment to be better than this one. And I think those who think that mindfulness is all about the spiritual level, there is a level of spirituality about it, I think. Because the more mindful you are, the less judgmental you are, the more you control your energy, you use information differently, and that comes from, I think, a really spiritual sense. But you can't access that without being intentional about stopping some of the noise, or slowing some of or quieting some of the noise of the chatter in our brains in order to show up and see what's right in front of you. The thing that I like most about mindfulness is that it requires, before you do something, to stop for a second and pay attention and gather some details, and in that moment, you got the gift of the moment. And the moment's gift was the full experience of the moment, because why are you here if it's just a run through the moments? And secondly, are we using the moments to be mindful? Are we using those moments in order to understand ourselves in a bigger and greater way? And that's how I think it ties to greatness. We don't discover our greatness by reading a book. We discover it by spending time with who we are and looking in and seeing what we find when we go there. And we can't possibly do that work when it's noisy and busy and distracted. We have to do it when there's a bit of space and some silence or some stillness, because that allows us to go and look in and to show up to that moment. And in the absence of that, we are always at the mercy of the loudest voice, the most significant distraction, and that might be the car that just cut you off. And if you don't stop for a second and realize that car has got out-of-state plates, they don't know where they're going, they didn't do this to aggravate you, they did it to make sure they didn't miss the exit, all of that could happen if you showed up to the moment, mindful in the moment, instead of just going the autopilot thing that says, hey, who's going to cut me off? I got a gesture for you. And in that, I think it changes or creates for us the opportunity to show up bigger to our world. And now I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's great, and I really appreciate that, because, and you brought up two things for me there. The first one is, how are we ever going to sell your book if you say don't buy a book? That was the first one.
You mean don't buy any other books?
Yeah, only buy Jay's book. The second one was, and this on a more serious note here, I think it really does. It comes from a spiritual place, but I don't think it has to be boxed in. And I know we talked about this on a previous episode about religion versus spirituality. It's simply this opportunity to show up and notice your reality in a bigger way from a higher energy level. So most of us get stuck in this anger or victim mentality, and those tend to fuel each other. And so what being present does is allow yourself to elevate into a state of awareness that is a little more forgiving, that seeks the win-win opportunity, because we're all in this mode of creation. We can really create the kind of life we want to live, but that's based on how what we're being. And if what we're being is these reaction-oriented people, if what we're being is people who are just waiting to get screwed and not people who are looking for opportunities, not people who are living presently in the moment. I'll give you an example. You know, when I'm driving to work, I live in Orlando, Florida. We have some of the most beautiful skies in the world. The cloud formations here are magnificent. And I can be on the way to work, and if I'm in that mentality where I'm looking at this gorgeousness, my irritation with going to work fades, and I can show up bigger and better at work. And so I think so often, and I look at these people just mindlessly racing to and from, to and from, to and from, not seeing what this majesty all around them, and they're completely missing it. They're completely missing it. And that's what, for me, that's what mindfulness offers. It offers that opportunity to see the gorgeousness that's around you, and then transform that energy, allow it to come through you so that you can then bring it into your life and realize it more fully. Amy, you're at a trip right now. You went to D.C. to talk with some folks in Congress and to really bring your mindfulness to Washington. What's been that experience? What's that been like for you there?
You know, it's been an amazing experience. I got to meet with Representative Alan Grayson today from the Orlando district, and I'm helping him get reelected into office. His election is November 4th, provided he gets through the primary election on August 1st. So we're strategizing about how to get him reelected and how that looks like, doing some fundraisers and whatnot. But I did get to spend quite a bit of time with him, over an hour at lunch, actually at the congressional lunchroom and also in his office, talking about what's happening on the floor of Congress right now. And I asked what was happening with what's going on at the border with the 52,000 kids there, and is there any real conversation going on, and what's happening with the people that are talking about this, who are our government officials. And what he told me is, Amy, it's very important that the people speak out as constituents to their congressmen, because the way that we can get change right now is if enough people tell their congressman, whoever that is, that what they believe, that they believe this is a refugee crisis, not a immigration crisis. I mean, this is of something we haven't seen of any kind of proportion in decades. So if the people cry out, he told me that he believes that there will be change. Until then, he does not feel like there might be the change that he would like to see.
So how do you speak to, that's a great point. So how does mindfulness, how does this idea of being present, not distracted, relate to some of these humanitarian issues? I mean, Jay, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that mindfulness does is it gives us an opportunity to stop, think, and choose. So, if we're mindful, if we're not mindful, we're mindless. I love that. I mean, in fact, to me, that's where the power in the word is. It's mindless. If you're mindless, you're not catching any details. You're disconnected from what's true. So mindfulness makes you see what things are. So like I say, in the next moment, you can then choose something. And that's what Amy was talking about. If you're mindful to this situation, you can't ignore it. It is now part of your reality. There is room for you to make a decision about what you could do next. If you're mindless, this doesn't affect you. It's not yours. You move right by, you flick the channel, it's not for you. Mindfulness doesn't mean you have to be part of everything that goes on. It's that you look with your discerning eye about the things that matter and move you, and then you decide based on those which ones you act on. You have to show up to it to even see it, so that you have the power of choice. And to me, that's the biggest thing that mindfulness gives you. It gives you awareness so you can look at energy, you can look at information, and then you can choose. And anytime you're mindless, you're not choosing. You're not intentionally choosing. You're rolling through the motions, and mindfulness is the gift of assessing information in enough detail quickly, most of the time it's quick, but that provides you the greatest gift that each one of us have, which is to choose how we move through and control our own lives.
That's powerful. And so this idea that we become so mindless and we're moving through life and we're ignoring, I think that's part of what a lot of people don't think about, this idea of, spirituality is this, oh, you're just choosing whatever you want, you're not committing to anything. And so mindfulness is this reality that that's not what it's about at all. It's about how am I showing up to this world in this moment from my unique perspective with my unique skill sets.
Talent.
Yeah. So, sorry, Kelly, what are your what are your thoughts? How do you begin to connect the dots here when it comes to mindfulness and activism?
Well, I mean, I think first you have to have a connection to yourself and know what you feel. I mean, a lot of people know what they feel, but they don't really think about it that often, or if they do, they don't think that they can actually do anything to change it. I was reading the New York Times yesterday morning and was looking at the the front page and the picture of, the boys and the 4 cousins that died on the beach, and it was so upsetting to me standing there in line feeling like I can't believe this is happening in the world. And there is a sense inside of me that even though I feel like I'm an activist and I can be called to action, like, what do you do in these instances? And you can have, all the mindfulness in the world, but ultimately I think what it comes down to is that it's a decision, like Jay was saying, it's a choice of what do you want to do and how do you want to move through the world, and being able to actually implement that into your daily life. And how that looks for each individual person is going to be different. I don't think there's any universal way that anybody rises to action, but I know that for me, it's that I have to get upset enough that this is happening in my world and look at sort of like what's going on inside of myself, like how is what's happening in the world reflected inside of me. And the fact that there is war, I feel like on some level, that there's war going on in all people. We're at war with things inside of ourselves. And so I try to look to that. And like we talked about in the last show, is like be the change inside of myself that I want to actually see in the world. Right. I may not be able to go, to Congress and like bang down the door and say, this is fundamentally wrong. We should be doing something about this or whatever.
Right,
no one's going to listen.
Amy's doing, right?
Right.
we got it covered. Yeah.
but I think what most people don't realize is that sometimes there's this drive to change the world. You want to change the world, but ultimately, like, before we can even deal with what's going on in the world, we have to deal with what's going on inside of ourselves. And most of what is in reality is going on inside of us. And so you have to begin with you. And that's what I do. When I see something that I don't like, I don't sit there and rage in a mindless way thinking that that's going to actually change anything. I actually go inside of myself and look at where does that show up inside of me and how do I want to relate to that inside of myself.
Right.
And that's how I bring mindfulness and awakeness to that.
Right, and I think it's kind of a double-edged thing because all the time we're presented opportunities to take action on things, and all the time we're struggling with these internal battles. So the question becomes, can you do both at the same time? And I think you can. I think the answers in there, to your point, are be the change you wish to see in yourself. So face those things. A lot of people go, I'm on a spiritual journey. Why am I feeling so down? Or why do I feel like this? And, I'm supposed to be here. We all go through that. Like, we all hit rock bottom. And it's okay. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. People get this idea of spirituality and they go, oh, you're so elevated, or it's this or it's that. It's like, if that's how you're doing it, then you're doing it wrong. I mean, quite frankly, because we all go into that depth. And I think if we don't explore that, if we don't explore our dark moments, then I think it's very difficult to create those lighter moments. David, what do you think?
About my dark moments? Gotcha.
Don't share them, David. You don't need to hear them.
No.
Speak for yourself, Jay.
Yeah, exactly. Mike is into this. No, I don't know. That's kind of what brought that up. What brought mindfulness up for me, right? Was exploring those moments, what I didn't like about them, what I felt in those moments. Kind of touching on what Kelly said, so that I could, one, avoid those for myself in the future, but two, realizing what that felt like and that other people sometimes feel like that. and how horrible that feels. So how do I personally, when faced with certain scenarios or certain situations or certain topics, like Kelly was talking about, how do I change the way I am, or how do I show up so that I don't instill those same feelings, those dark moments, in anybody else? Because if I do that, then that's one less experience. Because it's really easy for me. I'm by nature, I'm a violent person, right? That's what I grew up around. My gut reaction to almost everything is to knock somebody out, hands down. That's usually the first instinct. But I know what it's like to be knocked out. It's not that nice. So why bring that upon somebody else, right? That it's not okay. I saw a story on Facebook that I shared on my profile of a woman that was, it was some kind of a rally, right? There was the KKK and SS troops and all this other stuff on one side, and then there was pretty much everyone that was on the opposing side on this side. Well, one of the guys that had some SS tattoos on his shoulder, he wasn't very mindful, and when he looked up, he realized he was on the wrong side of the fence, right? He was on the darker side, let's say, right? And so he started getting his ass whooped. That's what happened. He started getting beat down. People used their picket signs and their sticks and started hitting him. Well, one of the black women on the other side jumped on. She wanted to stop this. She was like, "This is exactly what we're talking about. Stopping here is hate and attacking people based on a prejudice." So she threw her body on top of this white supremacist. In the picture you can see his SS tattoos and everything. He's wearing a leather vest. She jumps on top of him and she's stopping everyone from hitting him. That's the point. That mindfulness from her made her realize, wait a second, this is wrong. This is what we're talking about. So I'm going to do something about it right now. So for me, that's what I do. I know what it feels like to be abused. I know what it feels like to be hurt. I know what it feels like to be spoken of a certain way. And I know what it feels like to be misunderstood just because I was having a bad day sometimes. I'm sure I've cut people off that I wasn't aware of, to Jay's point before. So when that kind of stuff happens to me, I look at myself and go, I've been there before. Let me try to do something different or give them what I needed at that moment instead of reacting in the same way.
That's a brilliant point. And you brought something up there for me, David, when you talked about the guy who is mindlessly on the wrong side. And I think that's really where this shows up, because we had this conversation about neutrality, right? And I think that oftentimes because people are mindless, they just choose to be neutral, but in being neutral, they don't realize they're actually on that darker side. They're on that darker path because the world is moving that direction and they're just being herded along with it. I think that's really where mindlessness can put you on the wrong side of the movement, as it were. Amy, what do you think?
She's muted.
I'm listening to all this, and I'm really getting it's a fantastic conversation, a really important conversation. What I'm feeling is, and a lot actually been since I've been here, is that, for me, being mindful is when I put my attention on others. Okay, so when I find that I'm putting a disproportionate amount of attention on myself, then I find mindlessness. When I put a disproportionate of my attention on others, I become mindful. It's an interesting way to shift the balance, and that doesn't mean 100% or not caring for ourselves, but it's been very apparent to me that the more that I can kind of move past that 50% to the 51, 52, 60, 70% about the well-being of people besides me, for me that's been a very good practice of mindfulness.
That's great. That's great. And for me, that brings up this idea that you hear about people who are depressed, or you hear about people who are just hurting a lot in their lives, and you see somebody like that, and then they go out and help somebody. It immediately shifts the way they feel, the way they think. It's almost as if it's a shot of oxygen to the blood. When you help somebody, you automatically become more mindful, more aware, happier, and I think that's a beautiful point there, Amy. What are your thoughts, Jay?
I think that's what this whole thing's about. I mean, mindfulness, like Kelly had said earlier, is the connection to your moment. and all that could happen, and all that has happened, and all that you want to have happen in it. And for us to be aware in that moment, we have choices, and the choices come from what kind of energy do I want to show up to this moment with? What information do I now see or process? Because if I didn't stop for a second by being mindful, and I just rolled right along like I normally do when I'm in react mode instead of respond mode, then the information that I saw in somebody's face, in an event, in a situation, you know, every one of that went by me, and I didn't have any ability or didn't choose to have an ability to make some kind of response. So if we're talking about spiritual activism, I guess in my mind, spiritual means paying attention, and activism means do something with what you just heard about. So maybe spiritual activism is about being mindful and doing something with your mindfulness. That it lets you into what's true. Then in the next moment, you can decide what do you want to do with what's true. But you can't make a decision about this and offer change, make an improvement, transform your world, improve your life, any one of those, if you didn't show up to the moment to grab the information that was there.
Right. Now that's powerful. And so thank you for that, Jay. And I want to kind of turn the corner here, and I've got a kind of a surprise for you guys. I wanted to ask each of you a very specific question in regards to this. So Kelly, I'll put you on the spot. What has been yours? What was your turning point? What was that moment for you where you recognized mindfulness, started applying it in your life, and what kind of results did you see?
Well, I think I had always been very aware just as a child, and as I got a little bit older and I started, you know, I mean, it's crazy. Like, technology really didn't take off until I was probably out of high school, and so this whole thing, like, you know, the internet, cell phones, all that stuff, I didn't really grow up with that around me, and so I was in Thailand for a month, and I was on a beach, and there was, you know, really like no TV, no technology, and nothing to do but just enjoy nature, and I was so freaking bored. I wanted to die. Like, I was literally like, oh my God, what's happened to me? Like, I was feeling my body on the beach, and I just couldn't relax. I felt like if I wasn't doing something constantly, then I wasn't feeling, you know, okay inside. And so when I noticed that inside of me, I was like, wow, I used to not be like this. And from that point forward, I didn't want to be that kind of a person that if I didn't have something to constantly be, you know, I don't know, like just entertaining me or distracting me, that I wasn't okay to just be in the moment. And so I started actually doing meditation and doing different practices like yoga to be more grounded inside of my body. I'm already like an air sign, so I already sort of disconnect as it is, and so I've been just trying to do things that embody me, and so I do different practices like yoga and acupuncture and those kinds of things to sort of practice more mindfulness. But it's hard. You know, it's really hard. Like, we're so easily distracted these days, and my daughter reminds me of it all the time. And so, you know, for the most part, like, I just try, like, every single day to be more mindful in the things that I do, and I'm not always great about it, but the things that I make an effort, I'm definitely more mindful. So that was what the breaking point for me was.
That's powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
David, for you, what was that? What did that look like for you when you had that kind of experience of mindfulness and you started to take steps? I mean, what were some of the shifts you began to see?
Like Kelly, I was always a pretty thoughtful, mindful kid. I thought about things, you know, in a very deep way when I was young, and you know, but I still ended up going through the motions. It wasn't until probably somewhere around the end of my actual married life, you know, when I realized that was over. I realized that I hadn't for a day in my life, except for maybe the few times I was a kid, lived my own life. I was living somebody else's life. Everyone else was pushing the buttons and playing, you know, video game David. You know what I mean? They gave me advice, and I did it. They told me, I said, hey, what about this? You know, no, you can't do that because of this. And I did it because I thought it was the right thing, and I was making other people happy. I'm a people, you know, pleaser. So it wasn't until my life was absolute hell, and I tried to figure out how I got there, and I realized I got there, you know, because I was asleep the whole time. People just picked me up and kind of moved me over here like a baby, you know what I mean? Just go in a car seat, you're going along for the ride. And that really pissed me off. I got upset about it because the only one that had to deal with the repercussions of all of my actions, ultimately, even though I was doing what other people were saying, they were my actions. None of them were around when I had to deal with the consequences of those actions. So it was all me. So at that point, I started living for myself, not in a selfish way, but, you know, okay, who's David? What's going on up here? Why do I do the things that I do? You know, in addition to why I decided to change, break the cycle of what was going on with parenting in my family, right? In addition to that, I was like, you know, what's actually going on there? And I personally find that it's not I mean, there is a moment when you start being mindful, but because of that practice and that awareness, you find ways to be, and more opportunities to be more mindful in almost every aspect of your life. So it's been a growing, I don't want to say concept, it's just been a growing part of my life, being more and more mindful. But that's kind of when it happened, when I just realized I wasn't, you know, this isn't David. This isn't what I envisioned.
You bring up a great point about doing what other people tell you to do, and then you're the one stuck with the consequences instead of owning your own life and experiences. And I've done it for years, you know, just lived for other people and wasn't truly showing up myself. And I think that was, you know, and then you experience the consequences. You're like, and I think, but what you did, you got mad about it, but then you took action. And I think that a lot of people don't realize it's okay to go, you know, to that level 2 energy and get pissed off about it, because getting pissed off about it makes you do something. It makes you take action, and then you can climb your way back up that energy spectrum and, you know, be more, you know, go for that win-win, go for that forgiveness, go for that empathy and understanding. But sometimes you have to go there, get pissed off, in order to make that shift towards mindfulness. Amy, what did that look like for you?
You know, from a very young age, around 8, I had something that I was doing every day. And it's interesting because I've noticed my mindlessness comes less from having a discipline, but more from not being aware of my discipline, right? So I was taught at a very early age to be focusing on one thing much of my day, which was tennis, which is what I loved, so it was my choice. But I find myself, when I'm in mindlessness and trying to get to mindfulness, I try to recreate that practice that I've been able to have for a long time. And I'm very grateful for that for tennis, because I feel like I can get sometimes into mindfulness a little bit quicker when I'm aware of it, because I have trained that practice. And I think everyone can do that. I don't think that a sport is required. You know, I think everyone can train the practice of being mindful, but it's just a habit, right? It's like we talk about the habit of democracy, the habit of mindfulness. I mean, it's just that you're participating in it a little bit every day. You know, we don't have time to participate in it all day. Like, you guys have children, and Kelly made a great example with the kids, and everyone has different demands. But if we make time to practice at least some of the day or part of the day, then we can get in the practice of being mindful. And to me, it's a habit. And I'm retraining my habits. And things have happened in my life that have taken me out of that habit. You know, death, loss, sorrow, losing jobs. You know, things happen when you're out of your habit. But to get back in is, I think, the key to being, as regards to our spiritual activism. Because once you're back in the habit, you're able to have an effect in the world.
No, that's really powerful. And I think that goes back to Kelly's point from earlier, that you have to transform you. Like, you have to find ways to transform who you are, and mindfulness is a way to do that. And by doing that, you can see more opportunities to begin to make the change that you want to see, and be the change that you want to see, and create the movements and the awareness and the energy and momentum behind these bigger philosophies and these bigger things that you want to do in the world, by kind of expanding that from yourself. Jay, last but not least, what was that journey like for you? When did you first discover mindfulness, and what was the transformative effect? What did it lead to in your life?
I think I came into it by understanding that most of my life was always delivered according to somebody else's set of rules. You know, I grew up in a very strong Italian household with a very strong set of formula. You know, this is what you do. and that works for everybody if the formula works for you, but if you're the gay kid in the family, it doesn't work for you. So, getting herded along, like David talked about, just push along, so that, I was a non-confrontational, or I am a non-confrontational person. So if they said do it, most of the time I did it. And I found myself, married for almost 10 years in a relationship that was impossible for me to be in, and having to deal with it. So that was the moment when I realized that you can't fake life. And the only way that you fake life is when you go mindless to it, because now you don't even know it's true. So the moment I acknowledged that, oh my God, this is not changing, and I have now 3 kids and a wife and a house and a job, and I have to do something with this, and I don't even know. And the way that I likened it when I did finally come out and told people about it, it was like, I had a well-charted road in life. That's what it was like growing up in my house. We all knew what was going on next. So we knew what road we were on, even though it wasn't our road. And then coming out was being dropped off in the middle of the jungle with no compass and no machete. And you had to start again and figure out, where do you go, what do you do? And I went to every book. I'm an intellectual. People know I'm not the sports guy. So I went to every book I could, and that's where I got introduced to mindfulness, because I was desperate for what do I do now that I had then told the world about something I told myself I would never tell anybody, because it would leave me in a place I couldn't go from. The choices were made for me, and even if the choices weren't good for me, at least they were made. Now I have to make my own? What is that about? And that process came to, the book that did it for me was Further Along on the Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. That's just where I was. That was just what I was reading, and that was the introduction to, hey, this is your life for real. This is what reality looks like, and you have to own it. And that own it word, ooh, man, that one stung, because that meant I had to show up, see what was true, and then make decisions from what was true. So I think everybody has an event or a series of events, and I think it was in Amy's, or Mike, I think it was in yours too. Sometimes there's an event that starts it going, but mindfulness is a process. You don't wake up and say, boom, got it. It's every day with the intention you are a little bit more aware that you are a little bit more aware. And if you can do that often enough, then you can look back after a while and see, wow, I'm a whole lot more aware. That thing that would normally have aggravated me didn't, or that person who cut me off didn't get me upset. I'm aware. And I'm choosing things in that moment to be different. And so to me, I think, the events that happen in life sometimes are the kick in the butt that says, okay, you know where you are? Not so good. You have other choices. Let me throw you into one where you have to make a choice. Now, what do you think about that? Go make a choice. And if we run from that, then we can show up really big on the other side of it.
Wow, Jay, thank you so much for that. The candor is truly appreciated. I would love to stick around and keep this going all day, but we can't. We got to wrap it up. So first of all, I would just like to say how humbled and appreciative I am for each of you and your perspectives on this. I think that's really where we can create some massive social change. It begins with ourselves, and then it starts by appreciating the people who show up. You don't have to be perfect. Just show up and take an action step to move one step forward, just one today. And that's the practice that I would like to leave our listener with for the week in regards to mindfulness. Do one thing this week, one thing that shows you that you can show up to the world a little more mindful, and wait and just look and see what effects that has on your life. So again, thank you so much. Amy, it was wonderful to have you. If you could tell us where people can find you, that would be lovely.
You can check me out at I don't need the W, recyclinghappiness.com. I'm also just started a new Twitter feed at PoliticsElChini, PoliticsElChini. That's it, hashtag or @symbol.
Beautiful. Amy, thank you for all the work you're doing. It's truly appreciated. David, how can we find you?
You can find us on kickassdad.org. You can find us on Twitter at kickassdad. We just started a meetup in Orlando. We got some other ones popping up around the country, so that meetup is Kickass Dad. And on Facebook, Kickass Dad. there's a trend there. Just type in.
I'm noticing, yeah, I'm noticing some sort of trend. Jay, how do we find you?
I'm in the same kind of trending here. You can find me at thegreatnesszone.com. We're on Facebook at The Greatness Zone. We started the new Greatness Zone podcast. How's that for trending? And then here's one that's a little different. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's at JAY40 FORT.
Lovely. Thank you, Jay. Kelly, how do we find you?
KellyMarceau.com.
Beautiful.
That's it?
No trend? That's it, huh?
They'll find me. They will come. They'll find me.
I love it. Again, truly humbled by each of you. Thank you for being a part of this, and we will catch you on the flip.
Thank you. Nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.